I'm Jake Williams, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're talking about SUVs because in Australia in 2018 SUVs have overtaken passenger cars in terms of sales. In terms of sales as well, if you don't have an SUV in your lineup, you're a nobody. Thankfully, Honda has two, the excellent CR-V and now the 2019 HR-V. Now, if you remember, the HR-V was actually one of the first small SUVs on the market way back in 1998. And because of the CR-V, which launched a little bit afterwards, Honda decided to kill the HR-V because it wasn't selling. Now that small SUVs are back, and back in a big way, they've brought back the HR-V a couple of years ago, and this is the midlife update. There's some new front and rear styling, some new alloy wheels, a few interior changes, and also some mechanical items that have been changed too. This model right here is the HR-V RS, and like the Civic RS, it's a new addition to the lineup. It's a little bit sportier looking, a little bit more edgy, and it gets this really nice orange color. So without further ado, let's step into the HR-V and start finding out what life is like in Honda's small SUV. Jump with me into the cabin of the HR-V for 2019 and you'll see Honda hasn't really made that many changes, but really it didn't need to. This is definitely one of the best and most modern cabins in the small SUV segment. What I really like is the air of quality in this car. So you get soft touch materials down here where your leg rests, on the dashboard, and even on the doors. The whole door panel is with this nice faux leather that's also stitched. You sit behind this lovely 3-spoke leather steering wheel. It's a little bit thicker than it was previously and it looks quite nice and it falls easily to hand. The dials are also really legible and you can notice anything easily. They're not the most modern setup though. The screen on the right is a little bit dated. It would be nice if Honda had updated the graphics. Really, my only problem with the HR-V's cabin is the infotainment system. So it's a 7-inch unit, and for this year you get satellite navigation as standard across the whole range, which is fantastic, but it's not the same system that you get in the CR-V or the Civic, and it's also not the same system that you get in the HR-V in America because this car is made in Thailand, not in Mexico or Japan. The system itself is quite slow to react, and it's quite basic to look at as well, and there's also no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and that's something that I think Honda could do to really make it look a little bit better. It's still an immensely practical cabin in the HR-V though. You get these two kind of configurable cup holders here, they're massive. There's also a center armrest here with a little bit of a cubby hole beneath. There's a reasonable glove box in here, and you also get some pretty small door pockets, but also my favorite thing about Honda cabins is that you get a little storage tray down the bottom, so when you have your phone connected to the system, it's out of sight and out of mind. In this RS model, which is new for 2019, you get these really lovely heated leather chairs. They're so comfortable and going on a road trip would be no problem in this car. The back seat of the HR-V is by far and away the most practical in the small SUV class, and that starts with really wide opening doors that close with a pretty solid thunk. The soft touch materials from the front are also in the back, so you get a really nice lovely stitched kind of faux leather panel here. There's two map pockets, which is something you don't get in the Mazda CX-3, and there's also so much more space. Sitting behind my driving position, I'm just over 6 foot and I've got acres and acres of legroom. Pretty good headroom as well, and my toes can stretch out as well. There's actually a little bit of a cup holder down the bottom with a 12-volt socket, and there's also some bottle holders in the doors. And otherwise, it's a pretty good space, especially for a growing family. The boot of the HR-V is no different for this facelift, which is very good because it's always been the most practical in the segment. That starts with a really low opening and a really wide opening as well. So if you've got heavier things like this bag, for example, just put it in, it's nice and easy. There's a tiny little lip from the boot opening to the actual floor, but that's okay, it's really small. And once you're in there, you get 437 litres of space. There's nothing really clever about the boot. You know, you can't have any hooks or anything like that to hold shopping bags, but that's okay. There's a little bit of underfloor storage, and when you fold the seats down, it's completely flat. This is by far and away the most practical car in this segment. Now, of course, the biggest advantage of the HR-V is that it has Honda's magic seats. Now, this is something you get as well in the Jazz, and it means that the car is very practical. So first of all, when you want to fold the seats down, they fold completely flat. There's no lip, there's no angle, it's exactly the same. Fold it back up, and you also get a reclining rear seat for a bit more comfort on road trips. But then the HR-V's party trick is this. So you can actually fold the seat base up to have it next to the backrest, and you can fit things like taller furniture, IKEA stuff, whatever you want really. It's such an immensely practical car, this car. So what has Honda changed for 2019 with the facelifted HR-V? Well, mechanically, It is fairly identical to the car that it replaces, except for if you go for this RS model. The RS employs a quicker steering rack, so it's a little bit better to drive, it's a little bit quicker to turn in, and the suspension has been changed as well because you get these larger 18-inch wheels. The ride quality is definitely better than it was before. It absorbs bumps a little bit better. If you go for an RS or a VTI LX, which are the top models, you get more sound insulation, and I'm happy to report that it does actually make a meaningful difference on motorways like we are now. What hasn't changed is pretty much everything else. So you get a 1.8 litre 4-cylinder petrol engine. Made it a standard to this 1.8 litre engine is a CVT automatic. And if you go for a VTI LX or an RS like this one, you also get paddle shifters, so there's a 7-speed manual mode. In operation, it's okay. It makes the CVT feel a little bit quicker, although the CVT is generally quite good. You don't really need to put it into manual mode, in my opinion at least. Generally, the driving position is good as well. You get really good vision at the front, the back. The mirrors are also quite big, and really, driving the HR-V is quite easy. The driving experience of the HR-V is generally quite positive. The 1.8 litre engine, although it's not the most modern in technology, is pretty good as a performer. So the CVT does its best to mask the lack of torque at lower revs. When you're overtaking on motorways, for example, you kind of plant the throttle, you get a little bit more engine noise because the car speeds up a little bit, but then the CVT kind of drops the revs, and generally it's quite good on motorways, which is something it wasn't really that good at with the previous model. The steering is also quite enjoyable in this car as well. It's not quite as meaty as what you get in something like a Toyota CHR, but for most people it's going to be perfectly fine around town, and it does lighten up around low speeds as well and makes parking a doddle. What's not so impressive about the HR-V for this year is the active safety equipment. So Honda have made autonomous emergency braking a standard across the range. It's a very good thing, and we applaud Honda for doing that, considering that you can't get it on the CR-V or the Civic until the top models, so very good work to Honda. But if you go up the range, you don't get any active safety like radar cruise control or anything like that. That's because the HR-V doesn't get Honda sensing like you would get in a Civic or a CR-V. It gets the older system called ADAS. So if you go for a VTI LX, you get auto high beam, lane keep assist, and you also get forward collision warning, which is very good, though it would be nice if you could get that on the lower models. One disappointing thing also with the active safety equipment is that unlike the Mazda CX-3, you can't get blind spot monitoring, you can't get rear traffic alert, you can't get a 360-degree camera. It does feel a little bit dated in those regards, and if you buy a HR-V in America, for example, you do get those features, and it is made in Mexico, not Thailand. The 2019 updates to the Honda HR-V have been small, although worthy in the case of the RS model, and its much more appealing ride and handling. The HR-V's core strengths remain its high quality and insanely practical cabin, its value for money and reasonable all-round ability. We just wish that Australia was able to receive the full suite of upgrades that exist overseas, such as the brand's 1.5 litre turbo petrol engine, the Civic's infotainment system, and the Honda sensing suite of active safety equipment. Until it does, the HR-V's only unique selling point remains its practicality, and the Mazda CX-3 and Toyota CHR in particular remain easier to recommend.